everybody, this is Thomas Andrewick, your voice for the PPC and Whitby. Beautiful day on this 9th of November. And I have an opportunity just to fill you in on what has been happening over the last week. I'm sure most of you know what has been transpiring in Ontario, especially with the teachers. We know that they were on strike since Friday, or they went on strike on Friday. They didn't go to work on Monday. But what's the most important on this is why they went on strike and what was the reaction of the Ford government. I know this is a provincial matter, but it intertwines into how politics is being conducted in Canada in general these days. So we know that teachers had certain demands. They wanted to have certain things met by the government, back and forth as negotiations go. That's normal. And the teachers then said, okay, we will go on strike if certain things are amended, if certain things don't move forward, which is fine. It's in their constitutional right. But what does Mr. Ford then do? Because we've heard over the last months that, they have this great plan of getting students back to the class and that they're not going to miss any school. Schools are going to be open, etc., etc., etc. It's the catch-up program. You can Google it, look on the Ontario Government Ontario website, you'll find it. And of course, if the kids don't go back to school, if the teachers aren't in school, kids can't go to school, that whole plan starts to crumble. Well, how they wanted to avert this? Amazingly, they wanted to invoke the notwithstanding clause, which is something that is in the Constitution, can be used, but should be used wisely and sparingly, and especially shouldn't be used in a situation such as this, where people's fundamental rights, constitutional rights, are trampled and basically bullied. The teachers would have been bullied back into class, back to teaching. You can think whatever you want and have your own opinion on what the teachers want and how they demand, what the demands are, what CUPE wants, etc. That honestly, that's truly a provincial matter, and that's something else to be discussed and not on this forum. But what is to be discussed and what really matters here is that, amazingly, Ford government, so-called conservative government, so-called democratic government, comes out and says they're going to use the notwithstanding clause to avert a strike and to impose the government's will. What is that if not bullying? What is that if not tyranny? Instead of sitting down, listening to the people, listening to those teachers, listening to CUPE, listening to the unions and what the union members want, and trying to come to a resolution, no, they rather trample the fundamental constitutional rights of these people. That is to strike, that is to protest. Boy, sounds familiar. Didn't that happen already this year, but on the federal level? Of course it did. We all remember. We all remember the Emergencies Act. It was not the withstanding clause that was invoked, but basically the same thing. Emergencies Act was invoked, used, trample the fundamental freedoms and rights, inherent rights and freedoms of the Canadian citizens, so that the government can impose its will. That is the scary thing. And the thing, what is even scarier, what is absolutely mind-boggling and blows my mind, is that then Trudeau comes out and says, well, the Canadian government is there to ensure that the Canadian citizens' fundamental rights and freedoms are upheld, and that they will always, always defend them. Really, Trudeau? Really, Prime Minister Trudeau, that you actually think this? You don't think this. You don't take it yourself serious. You can't. But the fact that you said it, and the fact that you came out and said this, in light of what happened in January, February of this year, with the invocation of the Emergencies Act, shows that not only are you narcissistic, but you are mentally ill. You cannot think this. You cannot actually think this seriously, what you are saying. It's absolutely insane. Here you're going off on the Emergencies Act, destroying people's lives, literally keeping people in fear, taking away their fundamental rights and freedoms, trampling them, literally, with the help of the police and the RCMP and all the other law enforcement agencies that you summoned in. And then you go off and say, well, Mr. Ford, no, no, no. You shouldn't be doing that because we will come in to the defense of these Ontario teachers. Mr. Ford and Mr. Trudeau, you're both ill. What you're doing, and even to have that come into your brain, is sick, and it's sickening. The way you guys are treating your own citizens, how cowardly you are because you're cowards. You don't want to go into the Emergencies Act inquiry. You don't want to have to face the people. Tyrants, ill, mentally unstable people. I'm sorry to say this, but there's nothing else that I can say. There's nothing more or less that I can say for this other than you're mentally unstable. You're ill. And you are not fit for office. Not fit for office. You don't want to speak with every day. You can say as many times as you want that you're in defense of the Canadian people and their rights and freedom, but your actions speak volumes that you don't take that seriously. And you don't think of that. You don't care. All you care about is your own agenda. All you care about is your own power. And all you care is about getting what you want done. Insanity. You are not for the people. Mr. Ford, you are not conservative. I don't care how much you want to say, you're not a conservative. You're not for Ontario. And Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Ford, you are brothers holding hands in this fight because you think and act the exact same way. You can go on and clowning about and saying, oh, we're not the same. You are. And the fact that Mr. Ford does not have to testify in front of the inquiry of the usage of the Emergencies Act shows that you are a coward. And so is Mr. Trudeau, a coward, because you don't want to speak either. You don't want to face the people. You don't like Canada. You don't like Canadians. You don't like those people that you're supposed to lead. You are not a leader because you don't represent every Canadian. And you don't care about Canadians. All you care about is yourself. And that is the absolute truth. It's time that we start thinking for Canadians, about Canadians, for Canada and about Canada. Canada first. And that's what the PPC is about. We would ensure that there's actual accountability in this country. If I make a mistake, call me out on it. I will admit it. We can have a discussion. These people, these leaders, so-called leaders, they don't want to be held accountable. They will never say I'm sorry, and they will never admit to a mistake. Remember, the PPC has always been truthful and has always been giving the same message since day one, while these leaders have been stabbing Canadians in the back, trampling their rights and freedoms. Never forget. It's almost this November 11th, Veterans Day, Remembrance Day. Our veterans fought for freedom and for accountability and good government. This is not good government. Never forget what they fought for, and let's not forget that these people do not hold up those truths for what our veterans fought for. Remember, PPC is there for you. I'll talk to you later.